Hi there! If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children, so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Markella, and today we're going to talk about something that I think gets to all parents, a topic that we all discuss with one another, and that is tantrums and meltdowns in our kids. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed when your little one is having a meltdown, trust me, you're not alone. We've all been there. I was there yesterday. But today I want to talk about how we can help our kids regulate their emotions to have fewer meltdowns, looking at it from a different angle, our own emotional regulation as parents. Now, I want to be really clear here. This is not about blaming you for your child's tantrums. It's about understanding the powerful role we play in modeling behavior when creating a calming environment. We'll get into why tantrums happen, the challenges we face as parents trying to stay calm, and some practical steps we can take to help both us and our kids find more peace. Parenting is no easy feat, and it's okay to feel like you're struggling sometimes. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, because even small steps toward caring for ourselves and becoming more compassionate and understanding with ourselves can make a really big difference both for us and for our children. Oh, and stick around until the end, because I'll be sharing a special guide that can help you navigate through these tough moments with your child. You won't want to miss it. Let's do this. Understanding tantrums and meltdowns, we would think that this is something easy and, it's right there in our face and we all know what they are. But do we really know what they are and what triggers them? We've all been there. Our child is suddenly crying, yelling, or even throwing things, and it feels like everything is spiraling out of control. It's really tough to deal with, but it's also completely normal. Tantrums are those emotional outbursts that come with a lot of crying and yelling, and sometimes even aggressive behavior, like hitting or throwing things. Meltdowns can be even more intense and are often a reaction to feeling totally overwhelmed, whether it's from a sensory overload or big emotions that our child can't handle. Kids often have tantrums for a variety of reasons, and it's different for each child. Some of the common triggers would be hunger or tiredness, for instance. So when a child is very hungry or tired, their ability to cope just plummets. Regular meals and a consistent sleep schedule can help a lot. Think about how we as adults feel when we're running on empty. It's hard to manage our emotions, and it's the same for our kids. Then there's also overstimulation. Loud noises, crowded places, or just too much going on can overwhelm our children. Imagine being at a really noisy party where you're already feeling tired, and so it's easy to see how kids can get overwhelmed quickly. Moreover, frustration or inability to express feelings can get in the way and trigger a tantrum. Children are still learning how to communicate their needs and emotions, and when they can't express themselves, it often comes out as a tantrum. It's kind of like when they were babies and they couldn't say what they needed, so they just cried for everything, and we had to figure out what the crying was for. In that same respect, even though our children might be at a stage where they can speak and express their emotions, maybe even they do. Maybe you have a child that is very expressive with their emotions. Sometimes, even though they can express it, maybe they don't know how. Maybe they're stuck. Maybe because they're overwhelmed, they can't. And so that will come out as a tantrum. For example, a child who can't find the right words might scream or cry to show their frustration. And then there's also transitions or changes to routine that can be the root cause of a tantrum, or of several tantrums, actually. Kids thrive on routine, and sudden changes can be really hard for them to handle. Even small changes like taking a different route home can throw them off. But then imagine if we have a big change, like moving houses or countries. That can lead to a longer lasting period of tantrums and meltdowns. So in knowing these triggers, it really makes sense to look out for certain signs that a meltdown is on the way, because we can start to handle the situation a little bit sooner before it gets out of hand for both our children and for us. Whining or crying is one of them. These are often the first signs of distress. You might notice your child's starting to whine about little things that normally wouldn't bother them, for instance. Then there's yelling or screaming, of course, which shows that their frustration is ramping up. If your child starts raising their voice, it's really a sign that they're struggling to cope. Of course, there's throwing objects, which is a physical way of expressing emotional overload. When words fail, actions take over, and this can mean throwing toys or other objects. And finally, clinging or refusing to cooperate. This is where our children seek for comfort and reassurance. When a child suddenly becomes very clingy or refuses to move, they might be feeling insecure or completely overwhelmed. This is actually something that happened yesterday with us and our son for the first time, where he decided that he would no longer move. He was at this robotics festival, and while there, he was having a lot of fun running around and everything. But then when it was time to go, we had a longish walking distance to get to the subway. By that time, he was definitely overstimulated by all the new things because it was the first time he had gotten in a subway. It was the first time in such a big festival. There were lots of people. He looked fine and regulated while we were there for the most part. By the time we were ready to go, he had already started showing signs of tiredness, even though he wanted to stay a little bit longer. But on the way to the subway, he just started complaining that he was really tired, and he would sit at every little step that he would find. This, of course, was very frustrating because for us as adults, the subway wasn't really far away. We knew it was less than 5 minutes walking, and we would get there and have a seat. We also knew that there was another festival happening just a little bit later, and that there were a lot of people incoming. Yesterday was Athens Pride 2024. So knowing that these two festivals would collide downtown and having a very young toddler who was already showing signs of tiredness, we really just wanted to go. Having relatives with us who were also trying to get to the subway, but were very understanding and sitting there and waiting it out for him to kind of be convinced to walk toward the subway was also overwhelming for me, honestly, because even though they weren't pressuring in any way, I felt the need to just get him moving. In my mind, the distance was so short, we could just get there and everything would be fine. At which point, I got dysregulated because of thinking that way. So while we let him rest and have a seat, and while we reasoned with him and we were calm at the beginning, speaking for myself, at some point I started to lose my patience. He would walk 5 steps and he would get tired. Now, my sister being there and specializing in child development and small children, she explained that physically it's normal for him to be this tired based on his muscle and bone structure at this stage of his life. Despite this, I felt that it would only get worse as more people would come in, that it would be more difficult to get to the subway, and that this would escalate things, especially since he hadn't napped at all, and it was starting to get late for him. And so in thinking about how things could get worse with time, I started to get stressed. And then my stress didn't help for sure, because that's the first time that my son has ever decided not to move. So even though he made a couple of steps, then he just froze in his position and decided that he would not leave. And honestly, that's the first time he's ever done it. So I was kind of in shock. Like, what is this? So this is a great example of how things can escalate, because my son had shown the signs before we got to the point where he froze in his position. He was whining. And I mean, that's why we decided to leave about half an hour earlier from his robotics festival. And then while we were on the way, he started throwing this brochure on the floor. And so he was actually showing all the signs before we got to the point that he was freezing in place. Now, what I want to stress, and what I will stress later in this episode as well to you, is that while I say this, I know for a fact that I'm not to blame for the tantrum. The fact that he was very tired and exhausted, that he was in a new place, he was overstimulated, he hadn't napped, all of these things definitely are what triggered the tantrum. It wasn't something that we did as his parents that triggered it. However, the fact that I got stressed and overwhelmed about what was to come, or how we may have been causing an inconvenience to the others that were with us, that didn't help the situation. In fact, it probably escalated it to another level that wasn't necessary. And so again, this episode isn't about blame, but it is about looking at what's really happening and looking at how we can contribute to the situation in a positive way, and how it's very easy when we're in it and when we become overwhelmed for things to go south. So basically what we're talking about here is co-regulation. This means that our emotional state as parents can directly influence our child's emotional state. When we're calm, it helps our kids be calm too. But if we're stressed or agitated, it can make their meltdowns worse. It's a ripple effect, which is why taking care of our own emotions is so important. Imagine you're at a playground and your child falls and scrapes their knee. If you react with panic and anxiety, your child is likely to get more upset. But if you stay calm and reassuring, your child is more likely to calm down as well. I'm sure you've seen this happen. Our children look to us for cues on how to react, so our emotional state can either escalate or de-escalate their response. Suppose that you're at a grocery store and your child starts to cry because they want a snack that you didn't plan on buying. If you respond with frustration, maybe you've had a long day and you're tired, your child's crying could escalate into a full-blown tantrum. But if at that moment, and that's a big if, because as I shared with you a minute ago, I wasn't in the state to be able to co-regulate myself yesterday. I do co-regulate a lot of other days. Yesterday wasn't one of them. But if you can take a deep breath and calmly explain why you can't buy the snack right now, your child might still be upset, but they're less likely to spiral into a meltdown. So now I think you have a good picture of how understanding these triggers and signs is the first step in helping our children manage their emotions better. And if you're looking for more detailed tips, don't forget to download my free guide, Calm Parent, Calm Child. It's packed with helpful information and practical strategies to support you and your child. Get it at markelikaplani.com/calmparentcalmchild. The link is in the episode description as well. Now let's talk about our role as parents in this dynamic and why it's so challenging to stay calm when our kids are having a meltdown. Because in theory, we know what to do. In theory, it sounds like, why would I melt down along with my child melting down? In theory, we're much more logical than our children. Our brain is developed. We can handle more stimulation. So what is it that leads you and me, despite all of our knowledge, despite knowing, despite the experience, despite having reacted in a calm way and seen the positive effect, why is it that a lot of times, or sometimes, it depends, we aren't able to do this? Well, staying calm during a meltdown is not an easy task. It's easy to say, it's not necessarily easy to do. Parenting is tough, and balancing all the responsibilities can leave us feeling pretty frazzled. So while it's easy to say, stay calm when your child is having a meltdown, because that's what they need and that's how you help the situation, there are reasons why it becomes so difficult for many of us. If we know the reasons, if we know what challenges our intention to stay calm, then we are much more likely to be able to surpass these obstacles, to recognize them, and then regulate ourselves before we try regulating our children. One of these issues would be work-related stress. Trying to juggle work and home life can be super stressful. Deadlines, workplace conflicts, and the constant pressure to get things done can really wear us down. Have you ever found yourself snapping at your child because you're thinking about an email you need to send or a project that's overdue and they're just nudging at your shirt? It's a very common scenario. Then there's sleep deprivation, which is a common issue for parents, especially with young ones. When we're not getting enough rest, our ability to handle stress takes a big hit. And that's just because of how our brain works. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty tank. It's just not going to end well. Then, of course, there's relationship issues. Maintaining a healthy relationship with our partner while raising kids can be quite tricky. Miscommunications and unresolved conflicts add to our stress. For instance, if you and your partner have different parenting styles, this can cause tension and make it harder to stay calm during your child's meltdown. And of course, there's everyday stressors. The daily grind of managing household chores, running errands, and meeting everyone's needs can be overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like you're being pulled in a million directions, and it's easy to feel like your child's meltdown is an indication that you're failing. So when we're dysregulated because of either of these things, because of several of these things, because of something else that I may not have mentioned, when we are stressed and we're not feeling our best, it shows. And so our dysregulation can really affect our kids. For instance, when we're stressed, we're much more likely to snap at them, which can escalate their tantrums. Imagine you've just come home from a very stressful day at work and your child immediately starts whining about something. If you're already on edge, your patience is thin, and that's normal. And so you might react more harshly than you intended. When we are overwhelmed and stressed, it's very easy to have inconsistent responses. It's very hard to be consistent when we're overwhelmed, which can lead to confusion for our kids, and then that can escalate their meltdown. If one day you let something slide because you're too tired to deal with it, and then the next day you react strongly to that same behavior, then the child notices this change and they don't feel safe because of that inconsistency. So that lack of safety, that insecurity that they feel creates even more overwhelm, and then the meltdown escalates. And finally, there's physical symptoms. Stress can cause headaches and muscle tension, fatigue, making it even harder to cope. If you find that you're dealing with constant headaches or muscle pain, migraines, your tolerance for stress is going to be much lower. If we are constantly stressed because of work, if there's constant tension because our relationship with our partner is not going well, all of these things add to our inability to be able to tolerate tantrums. Picture this, you've had an awful day at work, you're stuck in traffic, and you know there's a mountain of chores waiting for you at home. You walk in the door and your child starts crying because they can't find their favorite toy. Now, you may have been able to handle this quite well on a Sunday when the house was already clean, when you hadn't been to work, when you got to wake up a little later in the morning. But today, your stress from the day spills over, and you respond with impatience. Your child, sensing your frustration, gets even more upset. Because of course, mommy's upset with me, daddy's upset with me. And suddenly, you're dealing with a full-blown meltdown. This shows how our emotional state can influence our child's behavior. Let's say, instead of reacting with frustration, you take a moment to breathe deeply and address your child calmly, knowing that you are also coming from a place where very validly, very legitimately, you are also very tired and you have every right to throw a tantrum yourself. But when you give yourself that compassionate understanding, just that one sentence where you validate that you also have every right to just go bonkers and start yelling because you've also had a rough day, that can really, along with a deep breath, regulate your nervous system quite well. It can intersect that process where the yelling happens, because the yelling happens as a way to say, I am not being seen either. While you may not be consciously competing with your child about who's had a rougher day, when your inner child feels that they are overwhelmed and they haven't gotten any attention, they're going to yell back. Because that is exactly what's happening. We end up yelling louder to prove that in the real world, in our world, things are tougher. And now that I say this, you might think, wow, well, that's really silly. You might even think that what I'm saying is absurd and it doesn't fit your experience. But if we really think about it, this is what our tantrums are about. It's our inner child screaming, let me be seen too. I'm here. So what if we validate that I've had a really tough day. I am also very rightfully frustrated, but I'm going to take a deep breath and I am going to show up the way that I intend for my child. I am going to show up calm and regulated and act as a model for my child. That makes it quite easier to step out of the automated response that we were very likely to have after such a rough day. So you might say something like, I see you're really upset about your toy. Let's take a minute to look for it together. This calm response can help de-escalate the situation. Now that we've talked about the challenges that we face as parents and how our emotional state can affect our kids, we can look into the specifics of how our stress impacts their behavior and emotional well-being. It's fascinating and, well, also a bit daunting to realize just how much influence we have on our children's emotional lives. When we're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, it's not just about us. Our kids are incredibly perceptive and they pick up on our emotions, even if we think we're hiding them well. That's something that I hear very often from parents. They come and they tell me, well, yeah, okay, you're right. I am going through this very difficult time at work. You're spot on. Our relationship is having issues, but we never discuss these things in front of our kids. I never allow them to see my emotion. We never argue in front of the kids. But this can all manifest in several ways, and our kids sense that something is wrong. In turn, this leads to increased tantrums and meltdowns. If we're frequently stressed or anxious, our children might mirror these feelings. They don't yet have the tools to process and manage these big emotions, so they come out as tantrums or meltdowns. For instance, if they see us getting frustrated easily, maybe we don't get frustrated easily at them, but they see us getting frustrated because we can't open the jar lid, they might respond in the same way when they encounter a challenge. Then again, children look to us as parents for cues about how to react to the world. If we're constantly stressed, they might start to feel like the world is a stressful place, leading to anxiety and insecurity and a generalized idea about what it's like to live, to be in the world. Imagine a child who sees their parent worrying all the time. They might start to worry too, even if they don't fully understand why. Also, just like adults, children can have trouble sleeping if they're feeling stressed or anxious. They might wake up more often during the night or have trouble falling asleep. A home environment that feels tense can disrupt their sense of safety and their sense of calm, which is crucial for good sleep. Because in order to sleep well, we need to feel like our environment is safe, it's not dangerous. This goes way back to when we were cavemen. It links back to survival mechanisms. Finally, stress can lead to a range of behavioral problems, from acting out and defiance to withdrawal and sadness. Kids might not be able to articulate their feelings, so then they will come out behaviorally. For example, a child who's picking up on a parent's stress might start having more frequent tantrums or become more defiant as a way to express their own distress. There's actually a lot of science behind this. It's called emotional contagion, and it's the idea that emotions can be caught from one person to another. Just like a yawn can be contagious, so can our emotional states. When we're calm, our children are more likely to be calm as well. When we're anxious, they're more likely to feel anxious. There have been several studies showing that when parents practice calm and mindful behaviors, their children exhibit lower levels of stress and lower levels of anxiety. This isn't just about being in a good mood, it's about creating an environment where our children feel safe and understood. When we model calm behavior, our children learn to regulate their own emotions better. Going back to emotional contagion, it's not just about what we model and what our kids see, but it's also about what they pick up, what's in between the lines, the energy of the room. Let's take a practical example. Imagine that you're getting ready for the day and everything seems to be going wrong. Because that's how it goes, right? You're running late, you spill your coffee, your child is refusing to put on their shoes. If you react by getting visibly frustrated and rushing around, your child is likely to pick up on that stress. They might start crying or refusing to cooperate even more. But if you take a deep breath and handle the situation with calmness, maybe even making a little joke about the spilled coffee, your child will be more at ease and then more likely to cooperate. It's kind of like a ripple effect, but just like it works on the negative aspect, just like when something starts going wrong and we get frustrated and they're having a tantrum, things can get even worse. It also works on the positive aspect as well. When we're able to manage our stress and approach parenting with a calm and positive mindset, children will feel more secure and better able to handle their emotions. They learn by watching us. If they see us take deep breaths to calm down and take a moment to collect ourselves, they're likely to mimic those behaviors when they are feeling overwhelmed. Understanding the impact of our stress on our children can be a powerful motivator to take better care of ourselves. I want to stress this. The reason that we're talking about this is not to put blame. It's not to say, oh, your child is having a tantrum, it's your fault. As we discussed before, their tantrums might be because of overstimulation. They could be because of a lot of things, because they're hungry, because they're sleepy. What we are talking about is about being present. It's about being mindful, and it's about knowing the power that we hold in our hands. So then how do we regulate our emotions better? How do we become better at interrupting that frustration, that overwhelm, that tendency to look or feel stressed? It's very, very important to approach this with kindness toward ourselves because parenting is hard and we're all doing our best. So before I present you with steps that you can take to regulate yourself, I want to note that these steps are not intended to create a sense that you're supposed to be this perfect parent that is never frustrated or stressed, that is always regulated. I want you to see these steps as support about finding what works for you and your family. One of the simplest yet most effective techniques is mindfulness. Like we talked about before, mindfulness is about being present in the moment without judgment. When you notice yourself getting stressed, take a few deep breaths. A great technique is the 4-7-8 breathing exercise. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8 seconds. It can help reset your nervous system and bring a sense of calm in that moment. Try to incorporate this in your daily routine, maybe first thing in the morning or right before bed. For me, the best way to regulate emotionally is to do things with my hands. And so that's why I've tried almost every hobby that's on the planet that I can do from home. But that's not practical for the day-to-day stuff. It's not practical for that moment, like the one I was in yesterday, where in that moment I need to regulate. This mindfulness exercise that I just shared is something that you can try on the spot. Then, of course, there's also the regulation that comes with taking care of ourselves, making sure that we get enough sleep, that we eat balanced meals, that we drink enough water. And although this might sound very basic, it's actually very foundational. When we neglect these things, everything feels harder. So make a little post-it every day that you can check off to make sure that you've slept enough, that you've drank enough water, that you've had healthy meals. And if you have 10 minutes, just 10 minutes of your day, dedicate them to doing something that rejuvenates you. It could be reading a book, taking a walk, or even just sitting in silence. That's an all-time favorite. More than anything, it's really important to be kind to yourself and to set realistic expectations. It's okay if everything doesn't get done. Prioritize what's most important and let go of the rest. If the laundry piles up or the house isn't spotless, that's okay. What matters most is your well-being and your relationship with your child. Also, your environment plays a very big role in how you feel as well, not just your child. Try to create a space in your home that feels calm and relaxing. This doesn't mean you need to have a complete home makeover. Small changes can make a big difference. Maybe it's a corner in the living room with some cozy pillows, a spot where you can sit and breathe, or use soothing colors and scents in your home. Finally, you can also make sure you self-connect. I'm a much bigger fan of self-connecting than self-care. Self-connecting is a way that we go back into ourselves. We start to look at ourselves with compassion, at our needs, at our wants. The only reason why we break down and why we're not able to be the person that we want to be is because we've lost touch with our inner world. If we want to reestablish the relationship with ourselves, we have to start looking within. One way to start this process is through the 30-day self-connect calendar that I've made, which you can find at markelikaplani.com/self-connect calendar. I'll be putting the link in the description below as well. And if you're finding this helpful, along with my 30-day self-connect calendar, be sure to download my free guide, Calm Parent, Calm Child. It's full of insights and practical tips to support you on this journey. You'll find it at markelikaplani.com/calm parent, calm child. And this link, of course, is also in the episode description for your convenience. But if we're talking about in the moment, when you're in the thick of a stressful moment, grounding techniques can really help. These are simple actions that can bring your focus back to the present moment. One effective technique, like the mindfulness one that I shared before, is the 5-4-3-2-1 exercise. And what you do is you identify 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This can help you stay present and calm down very quickly. See which one you prefer. Both of them work quite quickly. Both of them are great mindfulness exercises. So decide whether the 4-7-8 helps you better or the 5-4-3-2-1. It's really up to you. These are all things you have to try at least a couple of times. I would say 4 or 5 times, honestly, to see which one suits you. If you feel your stress levels rising, it's really okay to just take a break. Step outside for a moment, splash some water on your face, simply take a few deep breaths by going in another room. Giving yourself permission to pause can prevent a small stressor from turning into a big meltdown. What happened for me yesterday at some point is that I took a step back and I allowed my husband to take over. That allowed me to take a few deep breaths, to turn within, and to be calmer when our son took another pause and sat at the bench right outside of the subway, refusing to go down the steps and just get on with it. I was able to sit with him for a minute and be much calmer in my motivational speech about how close it was and how we were getting there and how I understood how he was feeling. When just a minute before, I was speaking to him from a much more frustrated place. Then, what's really, really important more than anything is to reflect on our triggers. Take some time to reflect on what typically triggers your stress. For me, in that moment, it was thinking that we were so close that things could get dramatically worse. And something that typically triggers me is when there are other people around and I feel like I don't have the luxury to sit and do gentle parenting, which might take ages because it's not just me that's waiting, it's others. That is something that triggers me quite a bit. I've seen it in similar situations, and it's something that I'm working on. You might wonder how. Well, something that I didn't do yesterday, but I've started implementing lately is that I warn others who are coming with us that there might be a difficult moment. I had already actually predicted that we may have had some level of a tantrum because I knew he hadn't napped, because I knew this was a very new thing. It's his first festival, because I knew he had to be presenting and he may have felt stressed. I knew it was his first time in the subway, and although he loved it, he was definitely overstimulated. So there were a lot of things that I knew were going to happen, which gave me a pretty good tip-off that he was going to throw some kind of tantrum. In similar situations, therefore, lately, what I try to do is I tell people, look, we may have a tantrum coming. When this tantrum comes, I am going to have to spend time with him and sit with him gently. I may even have to get up and leave in certain situations. And so I tell them it's okay for them to go on and do their thing. And we get to a mutual understanding before any of this happens. So in that moment, I know that they're taken care of. I know that things are clear between me and the others so that I can fully focus on my son. That is something I didn't do yesterday, and it did impact the situation. So basically what I'm talking about is planning ahead. If we try to anticipate stressful situations and we plan for them, if we know that our mornings are hectic, we can prepare as much as we can the night before. We can lay out our clothes, pack our lunches, have the backpacks ready to go. Small steps like this can make our day run more smoothly. So see what I did right there? I gave you an emotional prep example, and there's also the practical daily prep example. Finally, but most importantly, self-compassion. Practicing self-compassion, talking to ourselves as we would to a friend, reminding ourselves that it's okay to have tough days, telling ourselves that we're doing our best. This is very impactful. Parenting is incredibly challenging. It really is. It's such a gift, but it's also so challenging. And it is vital that we are gentle with ourselves. If we aren't, how can we be gentle with our kids? All of these steps are about taking care of ourselves so that we can better take care of our children. When we can find balance, when we can find patience within, when we can be kind to ourselves, then and only then can we do that truly for our children. And don't forget, you can download my free guide, Calm Parent, Calm Child, for more tips and strategies like this. You'll find it at markelikaplani.com/calm parent, calm child, and also in the description below. This guide is designed to help support you with practical advice and reflective exercises like the ones that we've been talking about today. Now that we've talked about the specific steps that we can take to regulate our own emotions, let's wrap things up by discussing the powerful impact that these changes have both on ourselves and our children. It's truly empowering to realize just how much self-compassion can positively influence our parenting and our children's well-being. One of the most impactful things that we can do as parents is to model the behavior that we want to see in our children. When we practice staying calm and managing our stress, our child learns these skills from us as well. They watch how we handle difficult situations and they begin to mimic those behaviors. This doesn't mean that we have to do everything calmly and in a regulated fashion and always so well-mannered. But what it does mean is that we show them that it is okay to have emotions and that there are healthy ways to manage them. You are going to get frustrated, you are going to get overwhelmed, but even after that has happened, if you can take a deep breath, if you can recognize that it's okay that this happened, I can handle it. This exemplifies what we can do after we've had some kind of a difficult situation. Moving on, when we're emotionally regulated, we create a home environment that also feels safe and secure for our child. This sense of security is crucial for their emotional development. Children thrive when they are safe, understood, and supported. Your calm presence can help de-escalate their big emotions and provide a foundation of stability. Basically, all I'm trying to say is that it's the small steps that add up to significant changes. Every time you take a moment for yourself to recharge, you're not just improving your own well-being, but you're also helping your child learn to navigate their emotions. I want to reassure you that it's okay to have tough days. Parenting is one of the toughest jobs out there. I'll say it again and again, and it's natural to feel overwhelmed sometimes. Progress is our goal. So celebrate these small victories and be kind to yourself along the way. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to share a journaling exercise that can help you reflect on what we've discussed and apply the concepts to your daily life. Journaling is a powerful tool, as I've said before, and if you have been here with me, you already have your journal for this podcast, because journaling can lead from self-reflection to growth, and it can be incredibly helpful in understanding your emotions and behaviors. So take some time to find a quiet, comfortable space where you can write without interruptions. Grab your journal or a piece of paper, and let's do this. First, think about a recent time that your child had a meltdown. What was the situation? How did you feel in that moment? Write down everything that you remember about the incident. Then, let's identify your triggers. What were the main stressors for you at the time? Were you already feeling stressed or tired? Reflect on how these factors might have influenced your reaction. Thirdly, let's assess your response. How did you respond to your child's meltdown? Were you able to stay calm, or did you feel overwhelmed? Be honest with yourself and try to write without judgment. Next, let's explore the alternative responses. Let's think about how you might handle a similar situation in the future. What strategies could you use to stay calm and support your child better? What strategies could you and would you like to use to stay calm and support your child better? Consider the techniques we discussed today, like deep breathing or taking a break. Next, let's look at a self-compassion check-in. Write a few kind words to yourself, acknowledge the challenges that you're facing, and remind yourself that you're doing your best. What can you do to take better care of yourself and manage your stress? I know that sometimes you might have a part of you that comes up and says that you're just excusing yourself. It is also important to give that other part of you that recognizes these challenges, that knows your frustrations, a voice. So let's write down what the challenges are. Let's validate what it is that you're feeling. Let's give understanding to that part that's overwhelmed and let it know that no, it shouldn't be stronger. It's doing a good job. Yes, there are objective things that are getting in the way, that are making certain days more difficult, that are stressing you out. Write those down. And finally, set a small goal. Based on your reflections, set one small, achievable goal for the next week. It might be something like practicing mindfulness for 5 minutes each morning or taking a walk when you feel like you're stressed. Write down your goal and commit to it. Journaling like this can help you gain insights into your own emotional patterns and develop more effective strategies for handling stress. Progress is what we're striving for, not perfection. As we close today's episode, I want to remind you that parenting is a journey and it's okay for you to be having your ups and downs. We all do. The most important thing is that you approach each day with more compassion. Let the goal be a little bit more compassion every day for yourself, and then that will spill over into your child as well. You have the power to create a calmer, more supportive environment at home, and that starts with taking care of yourself. So as this episode ends, don't forget to go to the description and look at the free downloadables that I mentioned, both the 30-day self-connect calendar that includes quotes, affirmations, and a small thing you can do every day, something realistic, something small, but something that symbolizes you taking care of yourself and going back within, connecting with your true self, with your needs, with your wants, so that inner voice, that inner child, those parts that have feel neglected start to feel less neglected, start to feel more heard, more held. And then there's also the Calm Parent, Calm Child 3-page guide that includes practical steps that you can take in order to regulate yourself and your child, as well as some self-reflection questions like the ones that I posed for the journaling exercise just now, so that you can get closer to understanding what your triggers might be and how you can get past them. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with other parents who might benefit from it. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. You'll find my social media links below, and you can also find me at info@markelikaplani.com. I love hearing from you. Until next time, take care of yourself and your little ones. Remember, you're doing an amazing job. See you next Sunday.